So this morning, I got up, had my cup of coffee, headed to the office for meetings with students, did a press thing for my book, prepped for classes, and recorded this podcast. Then, later than I wanted, I headed home for dinner, watched a favorite show with my family, and then headed to bed, also later than I wanted. Or wait, was that yesterday? Or maybe that was last Wednesday? The fact is, all the days kind of blend together. A constant, incessant, endless cycle of trying to get ahead in life. Like waves pounding the beach, or less poetic, like Groundhog Day. Remember that Bill Murray movie from the early 90s?
Groundhog Day! Get up and check that hog out there!
I think it'll be an early spring.
Didn't we do this yesterday?
And to be honest, I kind of take it for granted that the cycle will, more or less, repeat. Wake up, get coffee, meet with students. Wake up, get coffee, wake up with students, get coffee, wake up, get coffee, get coffee, wake up, students, meet with get coffee, meet with students, wake up. But what if tomorrow I didn't wake up? I'm a healthy, fairly active, middle-aged man, so I don't often pause to consider, well, death. That is, until the past year and a half.
I think we'd be back here. Now we've got mask mandates
again.
again.
The pandemic is far from over and continue to affect younger people because...
The COVID-19 pandemic has forced all of us, regardless of age, health, race, or gender, to pause and consider, what if I didn't wake up tomorrow? To ask ourselves, how am I spending my time? And how much of that time do I have left? And a lot of people don't seem to be liking the answers. We're in the midst of what's being called the Great Resignation. People are quitting their jobs in record numbers, 4.3 million in August alone. And the latest figures suggest 40% of the global workforce is thinking about changing their careers. But the shift isn't towards higher salaries or more prestige. For the majority of people, it's about finding something more meaningful to do with their lives, something that also gives them more time to connect with the people they love. On today's episode, we'll explore with psychologist Laura Carstensen why thinking about your death, although it can seem pretty morose, can actually bring future joy.
One saying I love is plan like you're going to live forever and live like you're going to die tomorrow.
And with Catholic priest James Martin about how religions have been using Laura's happiness life hack for about as far back as we can peer.
Especially Ash Wednesday, because when I hear you are dust, I think, boy, I'm just going to be underground. It's a time of preparation and to say, how do I want to live my life? What kind of a person do I want to be? How do I want to change?
I'm Dave DeSteno, and this is How God Works. As we get older, our values shift. While younger people tend to focus on new opportunities, new skills, and status, older people, and by older I mean folks over 60, focus on finding joy in meaningful relationships and service to others. You might be tempted to say, well, of course they do. They're retired or about to be. But COVID changed things.
During peaks of COVID, these age differences were eliminated.
That's Laura Carstensen, the founding director of the Stanford Center on Longevity. She's been studying how people's goals and values change as they age. And here she's describing the results of a study that a colleague, Li Jiang, showed her a few months ago. Like Laura's earlier work in China during the SARS pandemic, Jiang found that the difference between what the old and young valued disappeared. Younger people, like their seniors, were suddenly grasping for more time with loved ones and close friends. But when the vaccines arrived, things changed again.
When they first appeared, by the way, when people were more optimistic about them, I think, than right now. And she saw, again, when the vaccines appeared, younger people's preferences changed.
So if a pandemic made the difference go away, and vaccines helped it return, the true reason for our change in values couldn't really be age. No one's age changed very much. What did change, though, was their sense of time. Or rather, their sense of how much time they might have left. When you're staring down a disease without a cure, death lurks around the corner for everyone, not just for the aged. And that changes us.
People come to be more selective and careful about the things they're investing in when time is in some sense running out.
Laura is perhaps best known for developing something she calls socio-emotional selectivity theory, which she admits is kind of a mouthful.
It's the worst name for a theory ever. But
most people think of it as a theory about how our values and pursuit of happiness change as we age. But that's not exactly right. The focus isn't your age. It's how much time you expect to have before you die. Something Laura calls a time horizon.
We're aware of our mortality throughout our lives. You combine that with the fact that goals are set in temporal context. And it means that as we reach different ages, the goals we set change.
How would you describe the nature of those changes in values?
I believe that when people are young and see the future is essentially endless. We know at some cognitive level that we're going to die, but it doesn't feel like we're pressed in terms of lifetime in any way. And under those circumstances, people set goals that are really about preparing for the future. And that involves taking risks and expanding your horizons, exploring the world. And people engage in those kinds of goals. And according to the theory, by the way, this is highly adaptive because the future is long and nebulous and anything could happen. And you don't know what the future will bring. Then as time shifts and we start to get this feeling that we don't have all the time left in the world, time increases in value. And we also begin to pursue goals that can be realized in their execution. So in their doing, because then we don't have to bank for some long-term payoff. And so people tend to engage in goals that are ones they can savor. They're ones that feel good while we're doing them, that bring a sense of meaning and satisfaction. So we sort of shift through life from being risk takers and explorers to savorers and consumers of the kinds of relationships and experiences that we have accrued over the life course.
And often that savoring typically involves spending time with people that you care about, right? It's not savoring the fact that I made it. I'm a millionaire. I'm Jeff Bezos and I went into space. But it's more, I have less time and I really want to focus on what truly brings me kind of joy in the moment. Is that fair?
We ask people many, many times what's most important to you in life, what's most meaningful. And by far, the most common response is other people. Yeah. They name children, spouses, close friends. That's what matters most to people in the end, are their relationships with other people. And sometimes very meaningful investments in, say, philanthropy or volunteering or something like that. But what is most meaningful to humans tends to be other humans.
Yeah. And even there, I think the philanthropy example is a good one because it is still kind of service. It is connecting with others and helping them. I like the notion that you keep coming back to, that it's really kind of the time horizon that we have left until we reach that possible endpoint. But to me, that suggests that it's not really a theory about aging.
Yes. I started out trying to develop an understanding of well-being in old people. That is, this theory was developed to explain what was then called the paradox of aging. That is, older people's emotional well-being is actually better than those who are middle-aged and younger. And how could that be? Because we all know that aging is terrible, right? I mean, that's the premise. And so we called that in the field was called the paradox of aging. So I was trying to explain these old age experiences. And it was really through research that I came to change the way I viewed this and begin to test hypotheses about time. And I think it's probably the thing I'm most proud of in this theory is it's exactly what you just said. It's really not a theory of aging. It's a theory about time horizons, which are associated with aging. Sure. So we see age effects. But what we've done in many of our experiments is to show that we can eliminate this age effect with a simple instruction to individuals about their future perceptions of time. So what Barbara Fredrickson, who was a graduate student at Stanford at the time, and I worked together on developing a paradigm we call the social preference paradigm. We had identified social partners who represent different kinds of goals. One would be a close friend or a member of your immediate family. That's the meaningful partner. And another was the author of a book you just read, somebody who's information rich but may not be personally meaningful or close to you. And another was a recent acquaintance with whom you seem to have much in common. So somebody who holds a promise of a future with you. And we ask younger, middle-aged, older people, imagine you have 30 minutes free. Which person do you choose to spend that time with? Older people overwhelmingly pick a close, meaningful other. And younger people, their responses were randomly distributed across the options. So we had shown then that older people did have this kind of preference for close others. But if it was about time, we should be able to eliminate it. Well, we then ask, could we get old people to look like young people? So we say, imagine you just got a phone call from your physician who told you about a new medical advance that virtually ensures you'll live about 20 years longer than you expected in relatively good health. Following 3 people are available to you. Who do you choose? Older people no more likely to choose a member of their family or a close other than younger people were. So we could eliminate this age effect that people have been writing about and assuming was related to experience, development, change, or some kind of impairment that comes with age. These were the same people, same age. We just changed their perception of the future. And suddenly this preference that people assumed was trait-like and stable disappeared.
But if we can change people's goals, it's important to know which goals, which ways of living actually bring more happiness. Here, Laura's work shows that older people have it right. Savoring connection and finding meaning bring the most happiness at any age. And that means, according to Laura's work, that thinking about death, gloomy as it might seem, will ultimately make us happier. Given that, I asked Laura how her research has shaped her own thoughts about death.
You know, I heard a line in a play once that was, I think about death so often, I feel like it's a memory. And I think
it's Hamilton.
It wasn't Hamilton. Yeah. You're right. Yes, that's right. I think about death a lot. I think about old age a lot. And I do think it makes me appreciate life more. Yes, I do. I do ask myself, probably more than most, just because of what I do and aging, and I've always got mortality primed in my mind. If I'm using the years that I've been given in a way that matters.
While psychologists like Laura are studying how thinking about death can help people live better lives, it's fair to say they're not the only ones doing it, or even the first. Religious thinkers have been using the power of contemplating death for thousands of years.
One of the first things you see when you walk into a church is a crucifix, at least in most churches. And so it's not only death, but dying.
Father James Martin is a Catholic priest, writer, and editor-at-large for America Magazine, the leading Catholic opinion journal in the U.S., and he's pointing out something that, as an altar boy in my youth, I always wondered about. Why is one of the most prominent images in any Catholic church the image of Jesus dying on the cross? If you're Catholic, you kind of get used to seeing it. And since crucifixion isn't a common way to die anymore, it can seem almost abstract. But as Martin pointed out to me, in the past, it was a very real symbol of death, one that would evoke a visceral response. Kind of like if you walked into a church today and saw an image of Jesus strapped to an electric chair.
And I often say to people, imagine wearing an electric chair around your neck, or, as earrings or as a ring. It's much more striking. And, that's in fact what happened to Jesus. He was executed.
The central element of the crucifix is a dead or dying Jesus. The body is there. And lots of other symbologies in other religions, you just see the cross. And so I'm just wondering what that focus on death does. It is a normal part of life and one that we shouldn't forget. But I'm wondering, why shouldn't we forget it? What does thinking about it remind us of?
Well, it reminds us of our own mortality to begin with, which is something that I think Western culture wants to force us to ignore, in a sense. We don't like to think about those things. But it also reminds us of Jesus's death, and Jesus's death, as a Christian would say, for us. So it's a gift. He doesn't court death, and he doesn't glorify death in any way, but he accepts it, and he accepts it as part of the human condition. And as some theologians like to say, the most human thing that Jesus did was to die.
I like that point of accepting the human condition, even for the divine.
Which is quite something when you think about it.
Well, yeah, because, in many religions, what you glorify, especially more classical ones, is the power of God. But there is this kind of acceptance and vulnerability and willing to sacrifice.
Absolutely. I mean, Christians believe, I believe, God comes into the world as the most vulnerable being possible, a newborn infant, right? Completely dependent on adults to take care of him. And he leaves in the most vulnerable way possible, stripped naked on a cross.
It's certainly an arresting image, and one Father Jim is used to talking about in a pretty frank way. That's because it's his calling to do so. He's a member of the Jesuit order, or as it's more officially known, the Society of Jesus. Jesuits take seriously their charge to be contemplatives in action, meaning that they cultivate a deep spirituality and then bring it to the world. It's the reason why many Jesuits are involved in education and running retreat centers. The order was founded by St. Ignatius Loyola. He thought it was so important to recognize that life might end sooner than you think that he developed a spiritual exercise to get people in that mindset. It's not the most pleasant exercise, but it's something Father Jim finds helpful.
To imagine yourself on your deathbed and imagine yourself asking, what would I have liked to have done, is extremely clarifying.
When you say it's clarifying, in what way is it clarifying?
Well, if I have a big decision, and let's say that's a decision about something that's either moral, not like where should I go on vacation or,
Right.
What book should I read next, but if it's a moral decision or if it's a life-changing decision. Let's say that someone is faced with the decision to take a risk in their career, right? To do something bold and to maybe let go of something that is familiar, right? And you can imagine yourself on your deathbed thinking, I wish I had done that, right? And so Ignatius gives us those tools it's an imaginative tool to help us make better decisions, which is part of Ignatius's spirituality, making good decisions.
When I kind of try to do these exercises, although I haven't done them formally, suddenly they kind of shift my values a bit toward being less self-interested. We spend a lot of our time, how do I get ahead in life? How do I do this as my career? But when I think about, as I'm taking my last breaths, what do I want to be remembered for? What do I want to do? It feels like it turns me back toward my relationships with other people, and in some ways, my moral responsibility.
Well, can I give you an example in my own life?
Yes.
So I had a friend a couple of years ago whose father died, and he was a very close friend, a very close Jesuit friend. And I was right in the middle of a very busy time in my life. And it was one of those, should I go? Should I not go? I think we all struggle with these questions. And I used that technique. If I were on my deathbed and instantaneously done, of course I should go. Do you see what I mean? So it's clarifying. It's clarifying, and it just helps. So if that sort of tool or that technique that Ignatius used, that's actually less to do with Jesus's death, and it's more just a tip for making decisions.
Yeah, but I think it's, as you said, it's definitely one that can serve the purpose when we have some uncertainty about how we should kind of weight things in life. What is more important to do? Reflecting on how we're going to feel about it at the end, I think can be really important. And I think where it ties into that symbol of the crucifixion and death on the cross and seeing the reminders of death every day when you're a Catholic is that it's not just God. We can see God's sacrifice for us in that death. But when we reflect on it on ourselves, on our own death, as Ignatius's exercise makes us do, then it helps us think about, at least to me, maybe what we should sacrifice for, right? What's important for us.
And I think what's beautiful about that is that when people say sacrifice, it's often seen as something negative or masochistic, right? Like, oh, why would I want to sacrifice that? But it's actually, it's giving to the other person, right? It was a gift for my friend. He was very grateful that I went. I was very grateful that I went. And, my work could wait. And so the notion of sacrifice, I think, has really been, in a sense, twisted. Why would you want to give something up? But, we sacrifice things all the time. I always say to people, look, you have no trouble sacrificing sweets and carbs, for your physical health. Or if your doctor says you have to sacrifice, fat or butter for your cholesterol, oh, fine. But when it comes to sacrificing things for another person or for the spiritual life, people think it's suddenly masochistic. It's
or a
very
sign of weakness or something.
Yeah, weakness or just, you shouldn't have to. It's all about me. One of my favorite heroes, I'm reading his memoir now, John Lewis. This is my body. He put his body in front of people who would beat him at civil rights protests. And there's pictures of him in this book with, bandages over his head where he was beaten. This is my body. So John Lewis is sacrificing for that cause and for people. And, I don't think anyone would think he's a masochist. He didn't like it. But it is, right. It's selfless and it's really beautiful. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. So sometimes let's use that example. We see John Lewis's life as beautiful, which it is. And some people look at the crucifix and they say, that's beautiful, right? This kind of willing sacrifice. And I think that's a good model for people. Let's take a more down to earth model, the person who is caring for his or her elderly parent with Alzheimer's, right? Or with cancer. Now, in many ways, it's something that everybody would want to avoid, or you don't want to see it, or you don't want to participate in it. No one wants to have that happen to their parents, but you let that part of you die that resists. It is a kind of death to self, as spiritual writers say. You're dying to yourself, and it's very freeing.
Yeah. That resonates with me. My mom's about to turn 100 in a few weeks.
Oh my gosh. God bless her.
Thank you. And, but unfortunately she does have dementia. But
sorry.
It's, she knows who everybody is. She doesn't know what she had for lunch, but that's fine. Because we can still all relate to her and enjoy it. But, as I think about that and I think about what it means for her to be getting closer to death and how, who knows? I think about this. Is that genetic? And someday, might that be me? I'm 53. I'm not as young, feeling as young as I used to be. And so I'm at that age where death doesn't seem inevitable. It still seems a distance away, but I can kind of see it on the horizon as opposed to when I was 20. It really does clarify for me in the ways you were saying what's important. And I think I'm much more willing to sacrifice anything I can do in terms of time or travel to see her in ways that I probably didn't before. And I think it's just been incredibly clarifying. And I think it's going to make, when her time does come, it's going to make it feel better for both of us.
Yes.
That we have that connection.
Yeah. And thanks for sharing that. I think that you are experiencing, I would say, it gets really theological, but the Paschal mystery, which is the handing over and the sacrificing leads to new life. And in your case, the new life would be that sense of, I'm not going to regret it, right? I'm going to feel at peace. I'm not going to be tormented for the rest of my life by the fact that I ignored my mother somehow. So there's a strange sort of resurrection already going on inside of you and in people in these situations. Death and resurrection is not just when we die at the end of our lives, but it's every day. It's these little deaths that happen.
Deaths and in some ways rebirth.
Absolutely.
It's funny. I have this image seared into my memory, which is, maybe about a year ago, when her dementia wasn't quite as bad as it is now. I went to visit her, and I had been, thinking about this a lot and increasing the frequency she lives a good 4 hours away from me, and so driving there is difficult. But increasing the time that I take to do that and managing everything I can for her. And she looked at me and she smiled, and I said, "What's up, Mom?" And she said, "I'm just grateful for my son." She goes, I don't know what I would do without you.
Wow.
And that memory I'll keep with me forever.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways I feel badly that I wasn't there as much before, but it's a gift in some ways, as you're saying. And it was clarifying. From that moment forward, I never had this tension of, I'm kind of busy, or I can't deal with doing something for her.
What
today.
a gift. And that's the essential Christian message, right? If you had ignored death, or if you had sort of tried to pretend that wasn't there, you wouldn't have experienced that.
I wouldn't have experienced it. And, it's not just, I had that deep experience with my mother, but it's also changed kind of what I do daily with my children.
Of course.
Right? Because I think as I'm getting older, I could be where she is.
Mm-hmm.
What do I want to do before
Mm-hmm.
that point comes?
But you could see how someone who was not as willing to confront that would not be able to experience that new life.
Many faiths use reminders of death to help people take stock of their lives. On Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, Jews will traditionally recite the Unatana Tokef, a prayer that asks who will die before their time and lists a litany of ways: who by fire, who by flood, who by plague. That last one really hit home this year. Buddhists also meditate on death, sometimes while sitting in front of an actual corpse. For Christians, Ash Wednesday, the beginning of Lent, is the most solemn reminder of mortality. In the ceremony, they stand before a priest as he places ashes on their foreheads and says one of two things.
Remember, you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Or repent and believe the gospel. There are a couple different ways, but people feel like if you don't say, remember you are dust, they feel cheated. It's like,
well, in some ways, right, they're actually linked, right? So in Yom Kippur, it's the Day of Atonement when you're thinking about that you, in fact, may have limited time. And in some ways, that's the kicks, the kind of kick I think our brains need sometimes to say, oh, wait, maybe I should really think about changing, making amends, connecting not only to God, but to those others around me.
Yeah, and of course, remember, all these Christian practices have their roots in Jewish practices. We have to remember that. So the desire for atonement, the desire for repentance, for what in the Gospels is called in Greek metanoia, a change of mind and heart. You're right. On Ash Wednesday, and Good Friday, that all comes to the fore. But especially Ash Wednesday, because people start to think, how do I want to live my life? What kind of a person do I want to be? How do I want to change? And I think it's, I always say to people, fine, you want to give up chocolate, that's great. Give up chocolate, give up sweets. But I think God probably intends for us to do a little deeper digging in those 40 days.
But see, to me, it is just so psychologically brilliant, that period of reflection, of taking stock and how do I want to change that comes during that Lenten period. It's kicked off by, hey, you're going to die.
Yeah, that's right. That's a great point. I never thought of that. That is a good point. That's a great point. And in case this isn't clear.
In case this isn't clear, you have limited time, and it may be more limited than you think.
I think also it's very humbling. When I hear you are dust, I think, boy, in however many years, I'm just going to be underground, and my body's going to be gone and probably forgotten by most people, and it puts you in your place.
It is the great equalizer.
And I think it can be a corrective against the idea that we have to do everything. There's that too, right? You're dust. You're going to be limited. My spiritual director likes to say, there's good news and there's better news. The good news is that there is a Messiah. The better news is it's not you. So it's also it puts your life in perspective in two ways. In the sense of it's being limited and finite, But also it's just another life, right? You're not God.
Yeah.
Much as people think they are these days. When you can't control things. There's a lot of stuff you can't control.
So let me pivot slightly, because over the past, it feels too long now, 1.5 years or more, the whole world has been struggling with the ravages of the coronavirus pandemic. And I know for a lot of people, it's made them suddenly think about the fact that death is possible, right? For most young people, you think, whatever. But now, we're seeing people who are in their 20s and 30s, the tragedy of it die. I see these stories in the news, people talking about, this has made me rethink everything. I'm changing my job. I'm doing this. And I'm sure you minister to a lot of people. So I'm wondering, have you noticed anything about how the pandemic and that sense that life may not be as certain as we all like to assume in our illusion, how that's kind of changed what people value or what they're thinking about?
Yeah, it's funny. I would say that fewer people are focused on death as they are focused on how they want to live. I think that's how it's played out, at least in the people that have come to me.
But do you think in some ways what's made them reevaluate that? The sense
that's
that,
true.
I'm wondering if there's a parallel in the same sense of Ash Wednesday of, hey, you are going to end up that way, and maybe sooner than you think with this pandemic around.
That's a good point. And I also, I think that is a good point, that the finite nature that has been underlined by the pandemic makes people more focused on what their life should be about. By the same token, I think that people also have started to realize what they can do without. And so people who are not, as engaged in the rat race, as we used to call it, say, why do I need that crazy way of working? I live in New York City, and there have been so many stories about people who say, I don't need to commute for 2 hours, for this job that I hate, and how have they discovered it? Because they realize that they're doing without it, and they have more time for family and friends and things like that. I also think that people are so much more aware of what they miss. And I would say family and friends are the things that people miss the most in the pandemic, just hugging their friends and seeing their friends. And they perhaps didn't realize how much they missed them until they didn't have them.
The daily grind, the focus on getting ahead. We tend to think of these things as ways to ensure we'll be happy in the future, a time when we can enjoy the fruits of our labors. But what if the future doesn't come? What if today is the end of the line? Are you living how you truly want to live? Will you have regrets if you don't wake up tomorrow morning? There's really only one way to know. Stop. Take some time to think about it. You don't have to wait for days like Ash Wednesday or Yom Kippur. You can do that on any day, or even every day. You don't even have to go to a church, temple, or mosque. You can do it in your own home. Sit quietly for a few moments with your coffee, tea, or smoothie, and take a piece of advice from the Catholic medieval scholar Thomas à Kempis. Each morning, remember that you may not live until evening, and in the evening, do not presume to promise yourself another day. Just those simple thoughts, if you sit with them for a few minutes, will give you a course correction of sorts, one that will help you navigate toward what's truly important. How God Works is hosted and written by me, Dave DeSteno. Our senior producer is Josie Holtzman of Future Projects. Associate producer is Sophie Eisenberg. Our executive producer is Genevieve Sponsler. Music and post-production mix and master by Merritt Jacob. The executive producer of PRX Productions is Jocelyn Gonzalez. This podcast was also made possible with support from the John Templeton Foundation. If you want to learn more, you can head to my website, www.davedesteno.com. On the next episode, as we approach Thanksgiving, we'll ponder the power of gratitude.
Gratitude can either be, I'm going to close myself in, I'm going to be thankful that I'm safe and that my people are safe. Or gratitude could be, one of the ways in which we structure this open table where everyone is welcome and all are fed.
And why giving thanks for what you have helps ensure a better future for everyone.
Religion and gratitude are really about being part of a society, being part of a community, that the world doesn't revolve around us.
That's next time on How God Works.